A couple of announcements, and then a little revisiting of a question, and then onward we go. We are first. Don't want to embarrass anybody at all, but in our last week we kind of gave a homework of like come up with the stuff that. So if you want to volunteer any of that coming up, we will do that in a second. If not, if anybody's been praying for me and our family and our health this last week, I just want to ask you very kindly and gently to stop. My son went to the ER for vomiting, and I got diagnosed with mononucleosis, like I'm a teenage kid. So whoever's praying for me, if you would knock that off, please. Dennis, that's probably you. Yes, please don't.
Raise your hand if you were praying against him.
Yeah, right. In which case, I'd like to change the...
Be asking for prayer.
Yeah, right. So what I would like to say is do keep us in your prayers if you wouldn't mind. We're all doing well, but this is... Mama not getting mono would be a wonderful thing at this point. Secondly, we did have our... we said last time we addressed a question. Kevin and Bonnie and company basically said you did such a poor job of answering the question. We're coming back in person to put your the boots to you. Yeah. So we're going to do that one again. So we'll end up starting with this question and they can clarify it and ask it in greater depths in more ways, and we'll do our best to try to come up with a decent response. Then we'll go into a little bit more of the discussion that we were having around kind of what it might look like to do to do church the right way, so to speak, and then we're going to talk a little bit about this coming up fall, what we're going to do in the fall, which I think is exciting and getting more exciting. Okay, so first to the question. Fire away.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make this...
No, I've built it into a joke, so by all means, confrontation is what we like around here. We had, was it a tweet or was it a message? I forget how you sent it. Yeah, here it is. Eric is spamming me. This is his vengeance for me asking him to fix this thing. Here it is. This was the original question, so please expand on it as you would.
Okay. So the answer that was given last time was, okay, if somebody's going to be saved in the mountains.
Well, explain to us what the question originally was asking. And then.
Can you read the question back here?
Yeah. What is the notitia of the gospel, and is it situationally dependent? So the question is, what is the necessary content that you need to understand to be saved? And then what is, and does that change over? And my answer is going to be, of course it is, because historically it's changed, right? Abraham didn't know about Jesus, and yet he was saved by faith in God. So that's very easy, yes. But we kind of went and said, yes, and what do you need to, okay, so when you're in the mountains and a helicopter comes, picks you up, do you have to understand how the radio waves work and the lift works? It's like kind of a straw man argument. There's actually content to this that needs to be understood. And so is that situationally dependent now? Is that situationally dependent? Like it can be so simple that a young child can understand it. Is that situationally dependent based on whether you're in the Middle East and there's no Christians around you? Is that situationally dependent? Again, obviously historically that makes sense. I just wanted to kind of hit the ground running on if you're a missionary and you're going to tell people, or if you're just any kind of Christian and it's situationally dependent, then it affects how you're going to behave. And so I want to be very clear on an answer there, instead of being kind of well, yeah, of course you don't need to know how it works. Well, yeah, you don't need to know how it works, but you need to know some content. You can't just be hey, I got saved. Which God was it? Doesn't matter. It was any God. I felt a force hit me, and now I'm saved. I know it. Maybe, but what does that look like? What is that? Do you have to then understand certain things after that? Anyway, I felt like I saw the onion being built, and I thought it was my audio wasn't working, and I'm this sounds so interesting. And then when I listened to it, I was no.
So that wasn't an attempt. This is a great question. I'll tell you why it's a great question is a lot of the brand, remember we started a lot of this on the who has it right question was one of the implied questions of how should we do church like the early church did church, whatever that means. The reason there being, there seemed to be this united church right after between Pentecost and all the trouble that kind of showed up around 70, and then there was this diaspora, and then all these different churches kind of took root, and then you basically have Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, 10,000 versions of Protestant, major versions of Orthodox, few versions of Catholic. Which ones, is there a right one, or do you plot them as dots on the graph, put a best fit curve in there and be like, nope, that's it right there. It's the average of all of them. Who is doing this religion, who believes the things, who's acting like the Jesus wants them to act, of all of these versions of Christianity? Is it some of them? Is it many of them? Is it a few of them? Is it none of them? And when you turn around and say, okay, well, that has to do with practice and expression and liturgies and particular beliefs, some of which may be situationally relevant, some less, some which may be culturally relevant, some less. At the bottom of all of that, we know intuitively and can reason that there is a core set of truths that says these are the truths that form the basis or foundation of, and this isn't the case for Christianity, this is the case for anything. Here's a scientific belief system. There's a set of facts that are the core fundamental truths of that scientific belief system. Here's a religious belief system. Here's a philosophical worldview. Here's a set of beliefs about what a particular nation state is thinking or doing right now, or their leaders are thinking or doing right now. There are base facts at all of these, and there are a bunch of different beliefs and interpretations about those facts. For Christianity, specifically to the question that seems like the one question all Christians want to ask, which is, what does it take to be saved? Which is a question that gets asked in the New Testament. What must I do to be saved? That was literally asked of Jesus at a couple points. So it's not a question that indicates you don't understand what's going on. It may be a question that indicates, just tell me what we're talking about here. So what's that base minimum fact or set of facts that's most important to Christianity? That's what this question gets at in my mind. The reason for drawing the onion was to counter a particular belief system that I have encountered in at least Protestant Christianity, which says something like this. That minimum set of facts or minimum set of beliefs that one has to hold in order to be called a Christian, or in order to be saved, let's say, changed over time. Prior to Abraham's time, it was A. Between Abraham and Moses, it was B. Between Moses and Jesus, it was C. And after Jesus, it was D. There are people who believe in that one. There's a kind of covenant approach. These are new covenants, and if you're not a part of the new covenant, then you're out, that kind of thing. And so this was this kind of reductio argument that I was doing that said, imagine, this is Jesus in 33 AD. Here's a person who believes C, whatever the C belief system was that saved you, living in Rome. He's saved. He's in 33 AD. Let's pretend 33 AD was the correct year. We don't know for sure, but let's say it is the correct year. And Jesus dies and is raised. So that changes the new schema under which you're saved. The belief system has changed. So here's a guy in Rome who was saved. Jesus dies and rises from the dead. Now he's no longer saved. But hopefully the message will get to him. But he dies in September of 33 AD. And so he went from the state of being saved to being unsaved because he didn't believe in the right set of things. And so this is just a reductio argument to say, if that's your belief system, this is a situation that seems to indicate that might not be completely well thought through. That's not a proof against it. It's just something to give you an intuition that says, well, hang on, maybe we weren't thinking right about that. So that wasn't to answer the question. That was to get rid of a particular, or to at least bring into question a particular set of base belief systems that seems to exist in the Protestant church some places.
First question, to understand your point. You say understand. Do you mean understand or do you mean accept?
Two different things, right? Like
I know that's what
the Reformation, it was Netusia, Essentia, and Fiducia, right? So it was the content of the gospel, an assent to that information, and then faith in God was the three ways that they understood it. So they're distinct. I'm just asking specifically about content.
So-
That's a good question.
In your formulation, there's a set of things that you can do to be saved. So if there's not a set of things you can do, then you're saved not by your actions, but by God's actions.
So for the purpose, this is a good, this fits right into some of what I would like to talk about next, and let's go to your question.
But then we get into some determinism there.
Yeah. So let me see if we can dodge some of that and answer it quickly. Okay. Here, my children have reduced my pencil to this for today. We know not where it is. Here, this is a power plant. There's a nuclear power plant out there. And this is the source of your electrical energy, okay? Those are cooling towers. The drawing with my finger, sorry. And then here's the power plant, okay? And out of the power plant into some, substation and then out to your house. So here you are at your house, and as it stands right now, you are not connected to this power. So to a better analogy, power exists. You have things in your house that function well with this power. You have things that don't function if you don't have it. There are things that you're missing in life. There's, blah, blah, blah. It is the case that you can say something like this. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is I'd like to distinguish between thought and belief and then source of power in this case. And we'll make the obvious analogy jump. So here you are in your house. You're not connected up. And all you have to do in order to connect it up is everything's wired. It's the big switch on your breaker, or that stands there right next to your breaker. You just take the switch and you flip it on, and that brings power into your house. You can say all day long, I need power in this house. This house is no good without power. Is there a power plant out there? Yeah, there's absolutely a power plant out there, and I really do believe that it produces power and it can deliver that power straight to us. And in fact, I think that connection's even right there. All I have to do is flip the switch. You may think that. You may say you think that. But if someone says, well, do you really believe that? What's the sign that you believe it? The sign that you believe it is that you walked over and you flipped that switch up. And then that's not enough, right? So you flip the switch up and you're like, yep, okay, we got power. And then you go about your business and you never use a microwave and you never use the TV set or computer or charger or anything else. Because why? Well, for some point, the only plausible explanation that you wouldn't turn around and use the benefits that you say that you want from this is that you don't actually believe it works. Right? You flip the switch. If you flip the switch and you genuinely believe there's power in your house, there's no reason you wouldn't plug your phone in to charge. There's no reason you wouldn't use the microwave when you wanted to heat it up. It's like a duh, obviously, kind of proposition. This is a one-for-one analogy in many ways. All analogies break down to the Christian faith. The idea there is people can flip the switch and then they live a life without any power. And what that means is they intellectually assent to the fact that power is coming in here. They know that thing works, and then they don't use it at all. Well, can that belief power your house? So this is James's question. Can that faith save you? All right, so you either fail to flip the switch entirely because you really didn't believe that it's out there or that it's working or it's connected up to your house. Or you flip the switch and you just don't use it. And why would you not use it to charge your phone? It sucks my phone doesn't power. All you got to do is plug it in. Yeah, I should really plug it in and charge it. Right? Nobody does that because everybody actually believes when you plug your phone in, it charges. So the only explanation for doing that is that it's talk. It's not real belief. If you believed it, you would plug it in and do it. Now to the knowledge question of what does it take? Well, the truth of the matter is all it takes is know where the switch is, flip on the switch. The rest of the stuff you already know how to do, how to plug stuff into the wall or whatever else. Do you need to know what a substation is? Do you need to know what a step-down transformer is? It's interesting to note, do you need to know what the voltage is coming into your house? Some of that's nice to know, like don't plug a 110 into a 240 socket or something like that. But presumably the electrician's taking care of that for your house. Do you need to know how nuclear power works? Now there are people who are dying to know this stuff and they sit there in this house and they talk about it and they're like, if you don't understand how we drop control rods into a nuclear reactor in order to control its output and its power generation, then you're not really an electricity user. That's analogous to the theologian saying, if this fellow in the church doesn't understand all of the doctrine of the atonement, then he's not really saved. Okay, I would disagree, because what does he actually need? What he actually needs is flipping that switch and then acting like it's true. That, if you take an analogy like this-ish, and you turn around and you say, how does that fit the scriptures from Genesis to maps? The answer is, that kind of a narration works all the way through, which to my mind means it's a good theological hypothesis. Begin the battle.
The term being saved is so vague. I think the basis of this does go back to God's side of the equation, as though we had as though if we get all the right things in order, God says, oh gee, he's a scoundrel, but he believes all the right things, so I guess I gotta accept him. I don't like it on our side. I don't like us. I mean, I don't think that switch is there unless God installs it. I think it's more about being accepted by God, being in a relationship with God, being a friend to God.
So I didn't pay him for this point, but let me tell you why I think that this is another very profound point. Consider the following, another analogy. You are a lady or a guy, you're unmarried, but you want to be married. And when you tell all your friends, I want to be married. I'm all about being married. And they're like, have you met Sally? Yes, Sally and I are great. I'm dating Sally. Sally's terrific or whatever. And all you can talk about is marriage, marriage, marriage. I want to be married. Tell me what it takes to be married. I want to understand the process of being married. How does it work, et cetera. And someone's finally like, hey, this isn't about marriage as an institution. This is about Sally and you. Yeah. I got that. Tell me more about the mechanics of marriage. I want to talk about marriage, period. Do you mean your relationship to Sally? No, I mean marriage. If in the same way that you would look at, what's the pejorative term is some lady goes to college looking for her MRS degree. Or I'm sure that nowadays there's some male equivalent of that one, right? Where the idea is they care about the state of being married. They don't care about the love relationship between two people. When we talk about what does it take to be saved, we're doing the same thing. I care about the state of this relationship. This is about me. This is about what does it take to make me safe? What does it take to make me happy? If you understand it, it's about us. There's a God out there who is so smart and powerful. I mean, imagine for a second, you think of your favorite public intellectual, private intellectual, whoever else, just somebody that you would geek out over meeting. And imagine that they were like, hey man, it's been really interesting talking to you. I'd like to talk to you more. Come over to my house and have lunch. Albert Einstein invited me over to his house to have lunch. He wants to talk about physics with me, that kind of thing. Imagine how much you would love that. And if that kind of academic learning isn't your thing, then just make it whatever else. There's a God to whom Albert Einstein is an idiot, who has said to you, I stand at your door and knock. Whoever hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to his house, we'll sup with him, and I will eat dinner with you. If you understand that, it's no longer about being saved. It's about, are you serious? The guy who created all of this stuff wants to have a personal relationship with me. You're joking. I can't possibly believe that. That's a closer to real reaction. Like, that can't be the case. And then you have to turn around and look at the evidence and decide whether that's the case. But to me, this point gets to the heart of, if you're talking, and I'm not criticizing us, we're asking the question, what does it take to be saved in here? It's okay to talk about what marriage is, as long as you see that marriage is a way of formalizing and putting understandable, comprehensible boundaries on something that should naturally occur, and we shouldn't actually need this construct of marriage. If a man really loved a woman, and a woman really loved a man perfectly, you don't need marriage, because they're already doing everything that's required that you vow in marriage. I promise I'll love you. When you're sick, I'll take care of you. I forget all the other vow things that we come up with now. But I'll never leave you. I won't sleep with somebody else the whole time. And half of me wants to sit across the other side and be like, thanks. That's a fairly minimal approach. Can we ramp these up a little bit? I'm concerned about what goes on a little bit further than this. At the end of the day, marriage vows are a cheap, poor, minimal rule set for what it almost looks like to barely be in love with somebody. Consider that for a moment. right? If you really vowed the guy ought to be saying, I'll give my life for you in a heartbeat. I will derail my career for you. I will do, and whatever, everything else that he ought to say, everything else that she ought to say, that should be our marriage vow, because that's what a real love relationship is. Same is true of us and God. All right, enough said on that.
So we have two things that, and I'm trying to figure this out. So I think the way that it was kind of presented and the way that I communicated it was I didn't like the answer, but it's more out of curiosity. Like I'm frustrated with the fact that I can't.
Don't go backpedaling and apologizing. This is solid ground. This is the arena, by all means.
The way that I approach the question is going to be very important. So God has ways of saving people that are, first off, we go to a church that makes salvation very simple. So we may be very cerebral here in this class, and we may overcomplicate things intentionally or not, but it doesn't need to be that way. We go to a church that is like, we're going to make this so simple for you that like, I think they do at least a good job of that.
Yes.
Here's how you get saved. Just, yes, do it now. Ask God now. He will enter your life. Yeah, yes, okay, that's easy, right?
Yes.
Connect to the power station.
Yes.
Two separate questions, very different. One, we have this belief that children who are aborted or are unborn are probably saved, would be the best guess, I would say. How does it apply differently there?
Yep.
Without any cognition. And we see that throughout Scripture, and with God choosing twins and whatnot. Second question is, so all of the structure seems to be very good and maybe not good, but necessary for human beings in our current state of what Scott calls a sin nature and believes in deeply and truly.
Yes, right.
Sarcasm.
Sarcasm, asterisk, sarcasm.
Yeah. Whatever is going on, we're not doing it well. So God is corralling us in some way in love to give us structure so that we will not shipwreck our lives.
Yes.
God is very, like the Old Testament is full of like, don't touch my ark. You reached out and tried to stabilize it, you're dead.
Yep.
Like something there is requiring a little bit more seriousness on this, like if we did the relationship stuff perfectly, yes, like we wouldn't need that stuff. But there's something there that's saying, no, there's some structure to who I am. Like you can't, like I was saying earlier, like you can't be like, hey, so I had this experience with God. I'm going to call him Baal. I'm going to create an Asherah. And I'm just gonna worship him.
Right.
It's going to be great. To the point where like you start building a
Temple.
sacrifices.
Yeah.
No. You start building an altar across the Jordan, and your brothers come over because they've just been through 40 years, and they're like, "We're going to kill you all. Tell us about this altar." And they're like, "No. We just want to remember that we're still children of God too."
Right.
And that's because they've been with God for 40 years, just getting their butts kicked.
Yes.
So there's something there that like is a little bit, we're like oversimplifying. For the sake of understanding, I get that, but like we have to understand that it's the right God.
Yes.
And then I have to understand the application of salvation through people who don't have.
So I'll make an attempt at this and then re-ask the question that's key. Peter, you wanted to?
I think that since God knows the thoughts of everyone, He knows that someone is seeking who He is, then He would be the one to respond. So I don't think the request to know God better that someone might have somewhere would be kind of intercepted or lost,
Except for the parable of the
like
seed.
request timed out kind of a thing. Like I think it would be like God would know, and He says, if you seek, you will find. If you knock, the door will be open to you. So I think that as people seek God even a little bit, I think that God gives people more as they seek Him more. I mean, that's true in
I'm
my
asking
life.
the question as if God is sort of this like monolith out there somewhere that like you have to react to. So that's probably not a good way to phrase the question.
Well, I mean, if someone is seeking it, like Job, we don't know how he came to know about God. He was in a different land, right? But he was a righteous man, but we know they're righteous by faith.
The most righteous in all the earth, enough for God to brag on, right? Yep.
Yeah, so I think that can be clearly seen, and so that if people are seeking him, I think God isn't going to let someone just think, oh, hey, Baal is the right one. I think that he would reveal more of himself as people continue to seek him. And he knows what would work for people, what they would understand as being from God if he exists. And so he knows how to get that message across.
Katie, then Dennis.
I may be wrong, but I think maybe rephrasing the question or stating it differently might help. Because when we look at this analogy and we ask the question, what does it take to be saved? The answer seems to be recognition of a God that is presented to you, flipping the switch, whatever else, and obedience. And obedience would be, using the microwave or something like that. So recognition and obedience, and it seems like that's what I'm hearing across the board. The question is recognition of what? And is that what situationally dependent? And I think the answer is yes. That is the God part. That's
Okay.
what's injected into a unique human life based on their situation, which may be coming to RBC, or it may be an epiphany in the woods of, some remote place.
Well, then,
All right, so
and how much, to what extent?
well, we'll answer. So I wrote that down because we'll come back to this one in a second.
You start off saying, I think something like God knocks on the door, and he answers the door. What if God knocks on the door, and I answer the door, and I say, okay, cool. If that's as far as I go, what need do I have with Jesus?
Well, the person who said that was Jesus,
Yeah.
which is the idea. But let's generalize it and say, yeah, what? Okay, I got you.
Let me back up. This is before Jesus is born, say.
I got you.
So, let's say it's the day before.
Yes.
And I accept God, and I hear all this stuff about this Jesus, and I say, I can't buy that story.
Right.
But I still believe in God.
Yes. So that's a great question. Let me give you a part answer now, and then we will get to the ultimate answer as we work through Kevin's question, the rest of Kevin's questions that haven't already been addressed. In one sense, to me, in our analogy up here,
What I'm really describing here is your typical Jew back then.
yeah. So this is the Jesus part right here. Is the power, the nuclear power generation idea, which is some people have no idea. Like if I asked you right now, what the power that you have in your own homes today, what's the generation source for that? Most people don't know whether they have a coal-fired plant, whether it is nuke power, whether there's some wind farm somewhere, right, where it's located, any of that stuff. So let's say, in some way, you don't need to know exactly where it's coming from, and that would be my answer. My very short, incomplete, and unsatisfying answer to your question is: at the end of the day, the normal Christian theological answer to how was Abraham saved, the answer is it was still the work of Christ that saves him later, but it's applied to, so now to Dennis's point, and we'll get to, apologize because it takes some development to get to the real full answer to your question. We'll get there in a second. Three things real quick, and you'll see how it ties into Dennis's and Katie's and Peter's point. One, on simplicity, I agree. Consider the following: if whatever it is that we have to understand, whatever it is, isn't so simple that a person who's mentally handicapped can get it, then God is discriminating against people who are mentally handicapped. Oh, I made this person born mentally handicapped. They come with a sin nature, so that they're going to do the wrong thing, but I haven't made them smart enough to understand how to do the right thing. I don't think that's the case. I think whatever truth is that matters, that God cares about, can be comprehended by somebody who has can't tie their shoes. That's how simple it's got to be, on simplicity. Okay. Do we overcomplicate things? Yeah, in some sense, but so does God, right? Black holes or white dwarfs or supernovae are fairly complicated events, it seems like, but we don't give God a hard time for, why'd you make it so complicated? Why couldn't it just be a dot or a circle? Well, there's some beauty in it, and its depth and complexity and all that kind of stuff. So he's made a world where the simplest of the simple can enjoy it, and the smartest of the smart, and the most curious of the curious, and the most satisfied of the satisfied can all enjoy it. That's an amazing world, okay? So that's one point. The second point On the question of like, what are we getting down to? What is the thing that saves? In answering the question of what saves, you have to the baby's part of it, I should have been more specific. What do we mean by saved? What does one have to do to be saved? Okay, saved is an incomplete sentence. And a lot of the, philosophically speaking, logically speaking, a lot of the difficulties that we have as people in talking about everything, and I'm working on papers in maths right now with some people, and finding out that, in my opinion, a lot of the reason that we disagree on some very basic things about things like set theory, about number theory, about stuff like that, those things are problems because we don't complete our sentences. And so when we say, what does it take to be saved? Saved is from what, right? Saved from righteous judgment by a holy God who has a standard for us in order to live in a love relationship with him of, and you know, this sentence could go on. And that's, right. It's saved from judgment that ends in death. Saved from death. That's what we're asking about. Saved from death. How do you live forever is another way of posing that question. So you can ask the question, what must I do to be saved? Another way to ask the exact same question is, what do I need to do to live forever? And by the way, people ask both of those of Jesus. Some people say, what must I do to be saved? And he says, give everything you have away to the poor and you'll have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. Another person says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? That's the $64,000 question. 64 billion nowadays. Yeah, yeah, there we go. Inflationary. If only they knew back in the when was that show? When was the $64,000 question? 70s. Babies need. If you fill out the question, my infant son needs to be saved from the sins he committed, so that he's not righteously judged of not being worthy of eternal life. You're like that. Nope. Obviously, the sentence doesn't make any sense. I get it. That's why babies. Now, what about kids that are too young to understand A, but old enough to understand B? All right, now maybe you've got a more complex question. We'll get to that one in a second. Okay. To Katie's point, because I think it speaks to the third part, let me bring up a scriptural point that Peter's and Katie's have both touched on, and Dennis's question requires an answer to. You guys remember the story of Balaam? Balaam is a prophet. So the Israelites have just come out of Egypt. They've marched across, and they're now going to enter the land. And the local guys who have already suffered some significant defeats militarily are like, hey, new army in the area, stomping people flat. We need to call in this guy Balaam. Balaam is a known prophet. Prophet of who? Right? He hadn't been in Egypt. He's not an Israelite. Some random dude whose practices seem a little bit sketchy, like, pay me money and I'll come curse these guys for you in the name of God. And you're like, well, I don't know, that sounds right. Something seems off about that. Balaam shows up and he takes the contract. They're like, hey, I got a contract cursing. Got it. My contract cursing rates are as applies here for curses that end in disease, for curses that end completely wiped out. Here's it's a pray fee menu, sorry. When Balaam takes this contract to go curse the Israelites, this is where the story comes up of like, he's headed to go do this and there's an angel in the way and the donkey pulls off to the side and he ends up beating the donkey and the donkey is like, hey, knock it off, somebody's gonna kill you. And Balaam's like, this has gone straight weird at this point. He goes up and he blesses instead of curses him. And the king is like, hey, that's not what I asked for. And then he goes back and he does it again. He ends up doing this 3 times. 3 times, this foreign prophet of what God, I don't know, tries to curse the Israelites. And God, with whom he's in some sort of communication, because he changes his curse to a blessing, changes it to a blessing on the Israelites. Now, I don't think we should draw more theological points from that than that one merits. And it may not merit anything that says, no, Balaam was a true prophet of God. When you go and you look in Jewish rabbinic literature, Balaam is not treated as a good prophet of God, right? He's a bad guy.
Even the New Testament describes him as an evil prophet.
Right. But he has some sort of knowledge that God is there. Okay, so let's leave that out there to simply go to Katie's point of, okay, there's something, it seems fairly simple, and I agree with this one. There's facts about the universe that are true. You have to assent to these facts, and then you have to act in accordance with them. In this case, obedience is another word for what people call, did I misspelled? Maybe, belief. And belief is act in accordance with. And everybody hears the chair analogy. Like, I can say I believe the chair will hold me, but I don't actually believe it until I sit in it. Okay, maybe, but the idea is, would you sit in it if you had the opportunity, et cetera. So are these the same thing? I think, yes, obedience and belief are the same things. Because
Lewis
the
had
thing,
idea of the two parts of the scissors, right?
yes, the things that we're asked to be obedient about are not eventually will come into contact with kind of things, right? This is, I'm telling you how to treat the person that you're going to talk to in the next 5 minutes. I'm telling you how to treat your wife, your husband, your mother, your father, people with whom you're already in relationship. That's what this obedience stuff is about. You are called to do certain things that you're already in the middle of executing on. So that it's not a I'm going to figure this out later kind of thing. It's not a I have faith now. People say, well, in the faith works thing, because we're talking about works, works is simply doing what it is that you say you believe. There's nothing else to it than that. Works are not some laundry list of things that's like, I got to check, okay, I did poor, I did naked, I did sick, I did in prison, I've got 4 out of the 5 list, I got to get, no. It's simply acting on what you say you think already. If it's the case, excuse me, if it's the case that you encounter something in life that requires a choice, you make the choice about what to do there on the basis of how you think your action will benefit you and possibly the other people involved in there. The knowledge base about how that works, that is to say, is the choice I'm going to make actually going to produce the desired effect, that has to do with whether what you believe is true or not. In the same way that if your beliefs about lighting wood on fire is that phlogiston is in the wood, and when you set it on fire, you free the phlogiston, whereas other people believe in some sort of thermodynamic theory of fire, guess what? Doesn't matter when it comes to wood. Does matter when it comes to metal. You think phlogiston is released from the metal, well, you burn metal, it gets heavier. Certain metals, it gets heavier. So your theory doesn't work there. So there are some cases where any religion is going to work. Basically every religion out there that's worthy of the name has some rule in it like, do unto others as they would have you do unto you. That's because phlogiston theory and thermodynamic theory and quantum electrodynamics are all empirically equivalent when it comes to lighting wood on fire. You're going to get the same result. It doesn't matter which math you're doing, you're going to get practically the same answer. The fine portions of it come out in different cases. So does that just mean fine, just believe anything, and that since the golden rule is the only one that matters, then you're fine? I go back to Peter's point on this one, which is people who truly do want to do the right thing God is out there. In fact, Romans 1 and 2 talk about this, that the very reason, so some people ask the question, in fact, my wife went to Reed College. In her humanities class that was on kind of hermeneutics, their question, they started the class with their unofficial seal is a Griffin rampant that says atheism, communism, free love on it. So they're not on the pro-Christian camp. She was part of the Bible study on campus. There were 6 people in the Bible study. This hermeneutics class said, here's some people's idea of God. The second that mankind starts to get it together and do something worthwhile, God's like, well, we can't have them doing that. Let's confuse their languages and break them apart. Right? That's what it looks like, the man view of it. Like, hey, we were going to do a great thing. What was it that they were doing? Asked the Christian. What was the purpose of the building? And this is the reason for that. When Paul says the reason that nations were made, borders were set. Does anybody remember the reason? So that men,
Because they can reach out to God and in their reaching to find Him.
because God is not far from anyone. Now, God is not far from anyone. If you take that somewhat literally, that means that in 1684 in Frankfurt and in 2019 in Papua New Guinea, coordinates, XYZ, God is not far from any of those people. And I walked us through, and I won't rehash it again because we've done it so many times, the Romans 10, is it Romans 10 passage? Here's the Jesus part. Here's the Old Testament part. Here's the early Old Testament part. Whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Now, of course, does that help us at all? No, we're back to the same question of, well, what's the name of the Lord that we have to call on? And part of me wants to answer, so I'll give you two answers. I'll give you what I think is the right answer, and then I'll give you the more specific answer that I think is what we're asking for. What I think is the right answer is this. And the author of the Catholic canon has been closed for many years. The Protestant canon was only recently closed. After all of the works of C.S. Lewis were added to the New Testament, we closed the canon. But Lewis...
I quoted C.S. Lewis at one point and said it's not scripture, but I really like it. And somebody said, might as well be. And I was like, oh, God.
Oh, I got nailed on that one. Yeah, right. Lewis, you'll remember every time in his children's books, every time somebody says, well, what about this other person? What does Aslan the lion say to him? I only tell people their own story. That's somebody else's story, not yours. You worry about you, I'll worry about them. So on the one hand, our answer is this. You don't worry about, what about the guys in Papua New Guinea? Do I need to be a missionary to Papua New Guinea? God says, that's my problem. You let me worry about the people in Papua New Guinea. I'm asking you to do A. Now, if what he is asking you to do is go be a missionary in Papua New Guinea, then the answer is it doesn't matter. The answer, you have a call, obey it. Okay, and be sure of your call, of course, as always. That's the easy answer is it's none of your business. Let God worry about that. You have, what about a person who knows this? What about a person who knows that? What about you? What do you know? What do you believe? To Dennis's point, and I did say this, I think last time or the time before, what about like Dennis? You know, Dennis hasn't been to solid ground. Dennis has a vague inclination that, yeah, maybe there's a God, maybe there isn't. I don't know. It seems implausible to me. He hears some arguments about God. He hears some information. He's like, yeah, okay, maybe. Yeah, that makes sense. So I think, yeah, maybe I have a vague belief in God. I could, and if there was a God and he was as good as everybody says, then yeah, I'd want to be on his side. And then two guys in bicycles and suits roll up to his front door. And they're like, let me tell you about the God that you know, as God is, man once was, God was, as man is, God once was, as God is, man may become. There's this guy named Jesus, there's Satan, they were brothers, you know, and all the Mormon stuff that we like to pick on the Mormons that they don't necessarily emphasize. And Dennis listens to this and was like, and who said this? And Joseph Smith, and he was right, and here's how it works. And Dennis is like, I can't buy this, and he rejects it. For those of us that believe Mormonism is false, isn't it the case that we agree that somebody who understands truth, when presented with the Jesus of Mormonism, ought to reject it? And how do we know they ought to reject it? Because we, as Protestant Christians, reject that version of Jesus, and we say that is false. Dennis rejects that version of Jesus. And we're like, oh, well, he should have kept the Jesus part without the Mormon. That wasn't what was presented to him. What was presented to him was this twisted version of Jesus. Now, Paul has some very strong words for people who present the wrong version of Jesus, you know, and I won't repeat them here. You can read them for yourself. But they are fairly direct and fairly horrific, yeah. Paul doesn't like the idea. Now, here's the ultimate question in my mind. This is 0% knowledge, what babies have, of God, or let's say somebody who's kind of even thinking about it. Here's 100% of right, okay? So what is this scale? That is a line of whatever the minimum standard is, about salvation and its attendant facts. How many of them do you have to know, and how right do you have to be about them? How thoroughly do you have to have them right? So let's say that there are 5 facts, and that as you think about those 5 facts, they entail 15 different truths. So there's something like 20 things that you have to have right to have 100% knowledge that's 100% correct on the stuff that matters. How much of that do you and I have right? Another way of phrasing that question is, of the minimum parts of Christianity that it takes to know in order to understand what it is to be saved, are you 100% right about all of that? And if the answer is you have to be 100% right about all of that, and by the way, that applies all the way through history, not just now. If you have to be 100% right on all of that, is anybody even possibly saved? Unless that is so simple that it's like 3 things or 2 things.
I'm asking questions that I thought I knew the answers to like 3 different times in 3 different ways.
Yes.
So like, no.
gotta be a little misleading to force it, to try to fit it into that. If it is about relationship, the answer's gotta be 0. I just know he is and he loves me. You know?
All right, now you see, this is a promise he's not been paid. This is not a 0 to 100% knowledge base thing. There is a line, and there are no numbers. And this is yes, and this is no. That is all Christianity, all a relationship with God is about. If you know there's a God, let's let that if sit out there, and we can debate whether anybody, some people are going to want to say, everybody knows there's a God. Some people just suppress it or ignore it. Some people are going to say, no, some people don't know it, and then they know it later. Some people are going to say they legitimately did know it, and someone's convinced them out of it, and maybe they can know it again later. But at the end of the day, I think that every human being ends up with a choice. The choice is very, very simple. And this is the question. Who is God? So that's question 1. The question 2 is, are you going to let that person, that being, be God, or are you going to be God? That's the yes or no question. Yes, I'll let God be God, and then that entails a whole bunch of stuff. Whatever it is. And that's what ends up getting revealed to you, that you know, etc. No, I'll do it my own way. Adam and Eve's choice, when you think about it, they didn't know any of that. They don't know what salvation is. They don't know they still made somehow a moral choice without, how do you make a moral choice without the knowledge of good and evil? Think about that for a second. They literally didn't have, in the story, whether it's literal or not, they did not have, give me a second, Dennis, they did not have the knowledge of good and evil. I don't know how to make moral choices because I don't know what a moral choice is. What was Adam and Eve's choice? Do I trust God, or do I want to make all the calls myself? What did the serpent say to them? Did God really say that? Do you trust God? God does not want you to have this, because if you eat this, you will know, you will have knowledge and be like God. And so ultimately, what God says is, trust me, I'll make you, you already are like me. I made you in my image. And if it's knowledge that you need, I will give you that. But some knowledge you want and some knowledge you don't. Let me give you the good knowledge. And if anybody's like, oh, that's terrible. I don't want just the good knowledge. I want all knowledge. Let me ask you a question. You ever see something you wish you could unsee? You ever hear something you wish you could unhear? Not all things are good, right? Some knowledge you're like, I would rather not have had that knowledge. That does exist. So in Adam and Eve's case, consider that their choice, Adam and Eve's choice, is exactly the same choice that you and I have to make today. Do you trust God, or do you want to make the call yourself? That is the only question that matters. Everything else is details. Dennis.
You never really answered my question. You brought up the analogy of this guy's knock on my door and present the Mormon Jesus.
Yes.
Say it was Jehovah's Witnesses, they presented Joseph. Well, what about your Jesus? What about if somebody presents that Jesus to me?
Yes.
Or the right Jesus? And I say, no, I still can't buy that. But I still believe in God.
Okay. So then what I would say to you, if...
Which, by the way, is a Jew before Jesus.
Yes, agreed. And by the way, I think that the method for salvation is the same before Jesus as it is after Jesus. I just think, in my opinion, this is down to this analogy over here. But I ask you the following question, pretend this is diagnostic. And let's say that so remember, you believe in God in this scenario here. Do you trust him?
This God that
Yes.
knocked on my door,
No,
yeah.
the God, not the Mormons' version, not our version, whatever. Do you trust him? Okay, and he says, if you trust me, then do the following things. Will you do them?
I do the following things.
Yes, okay. That's all that it takes, in my opinion, to be saved. And I think what happens, sorry, go ahead.
Well, then, but I reject Jesus.
Okay. What I think actually happens in the world where you genuinely say yes to God. God's God, I'm not. I should listen to him, I shouldn't. And why would you do that? Not just because, well, there's this positional thing about God, because God could be evil, right? If God's evil, then we shouldn't do what God says. We want to do the right thing. If God is good and loving, and what he really wants is me to be happy and live forever, then duh, I should do what he has to say because he loves me and he wants me to live forever. Why do we have silly rules? The same reason you want your kid to grow up to be a wonderful lady or man. Do you? Why do you give them silly rules? Because when they're kids, the rule, don't bite your brother, that does not encompass what it is to be a good lady. But it's sort of a minimum standard. But for kids, that might actually be an appropriate one. Hey, at your stage in life, let's start with the first thing. Don't bite your brother, that's not loving. And eventually you get to the place where you're putting yourself in their shoes and you think what their thoughts are, and then you figure out what it is to make them happy, and then you instantiate that yourself. So in short, Dennis, the answer is if you believe in God and you're like, yeah, I want to love and be in a relationship with that God because he loves and wants to be in a relationship with me, then he will provide the information to you. And if what that means is the Reston Bible Church version of Jesus is false, and you look at it and you reject it and you say, well, that's not right. I know that's not right. But you really do believe that, then God will bring you to the point where if there is a Jesus that is the right Jesus, if you get what I'm saying, God will bring you to the point where you meet that person. That's what will happen. Yeah, sorry.
I could drop dead right after I said, I don't buy the Jesus.
You're acting like God is like, I got to get this in front of Dennis. I got stuff going on this week. I got Katie taken care of. Scott's got mono, idiot. Let me take care of that. Dennis got hit. He didn't sell his Pedicab tab. He got run over. Rats. So close, I missed it. That's not a realistic concept of God. No, it's not. God doesn't get taken by surprise by anything in the world. Running the world, the chessboard of the world,
Listen, I could have
not without God knowing it.
I could have a rag experience right now.
Yeah.
I'd drop dead.
Not without God knowing
You
that
wouldn't be
and anticipating that.
responsible for anything you didn't know because of the circumstances, right? God's in control of all of it. He's not going to be like, well, oops, he died and I didn't show him Jesus yet.
But what about the people before Jesus?
I already answered that question. Part of it before you were here, which basically is we'll get to Al in 1 second, but the short answer to it is God's standard, again, is really not do you know about Jesus, understand everything that he did, understand the mechanisms by how it works. The answer is this. Do you want to do what God has for you to do? Example, Samaritan woman. Remember who Jesus says in this conversation, I've been sent to the Jews. I'm not even really supposed to be talking to you guys. And the Samaritan woman lies to him, like, go get your husband. I don't have a husband. You're right, you don't have a husband. You had 5. And the guy you're living with right now is not your husband. And she's like, okay, subject change. You guys say we're supposed to worship in Jerusalem, but we go worship over here. And he's like, there's coming a time when you won't worship there or here, but in spirit and in truth. And she's like, okay, I get it. So God, literally a Samaritan woman, God and Jesus encounters, and she goes and brings everybody to talk to him, and he stays there for a little while and talks to him, okay? So
They say at one point, we used to believe because of you, but
now we've heard ourselves.
We've seen him.
Yes. So at the end of the day, Dennis, don't worry about that. If your heart really says, you know what, I really would like to accept God, but these guys around, those guys at McLean, what a bunch of knuckleheads. Lon Solomon, I hate him. Scott, what a pedantic jackass. There's no way that guy has the truth. Fine, you're probably right, but if you really are after after saying yes to God, don't worry about dropping dead first, but do seek him.
Don't worry about what?
Dropping dead first. God's not going to let you drop dead if your heart will ever say yes. That's my belief.
Now, you're sort of playing a God card now. God, sooner or later, is going to wake me up.
It's the only card I have. It's the best card in the deck. Of course I'm going to play it. And the God card, by the way, this is a joke. For Dennis, the God card is scientific set of hypotheses. My hypothesis doesn't work out. I just fill in it's the box of like miracle happens. And I'm just like, God did it, right? Not a good empirical approach.
It's not out of gas. It's like
Yeah.
folding when you have a royal flush.
Yeah, why would I fold if I have a royal flush? That's a great point.
Kevin introduced me last Thursday when we met to the Chicago Statement.
Yes, of faith. It's an semi-recent evangelical statement of faith.
Familiar with that?
Yes.
I found it fascinating. It was just fascinating. That is the God card.
Well, it's a statement of belief. It's intended to say, how many Protestant denominations do we have? 1,000? Look, what can we agree on? That was what that was about. Al, sorry, I've been leaving you hanging for a while.
Personally, do
Let me, I would say most of it.
What?
Most of it. Most of it.
Before the Chicago State, you can't agree with most of it, you have to agree with all of it, or none of it.
Why is that the
You
case?
didn't have to sign it, though.
Why is that the case?
Another time.
If there is more than one, if there's more than one truth claim in any statement, you're not forced to agree with all of them, because there's a potential for false dichotomy, repetition, identity, all these other logical errors in there. So it's never the case that you're forced to agree with everything.
With this one, there's some, yeah, so.
Yes, yes. Yeah, sorry. Good point. My referee has blown the whistle. There's a flag on the play. Al, we've been leaving you hanging, brother. What's going on?
When Dennis asked this question, I thought of a couple of verses. One of the Beatitudes, Jesus says that the pure in heart will see God. And of course, the problem is no one's pure in heart, so no one's going to see God unless he supernaturally goes beyond by his grace, he opens your eyes to see the truth anyway. But
Well, yeah.
the other verse,
I'm gonna draw this because I want to talk about this in a second. Go ahead.
but then the other verse is where it says that Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the exact representation. So when Dennis, when you say you agree, you accept, trust God, but you don't trust this Jesus God. I mean, if Jesus really is the Messiah, the Son of God, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, if that's true, then you wouldn't, it would be a false dichotomy. That's what it boils down to, is Jesus really who he claims to be.
Let me make a point about Al's verse he brings out, the Beatitude, blessed are the pure in heart. For two reasons at least, we believe that once your heart is impure, you're just hosed, unless a miracle occurs. Okay. First, when we say, if you say to yourself, just consider yourself in the abstract, in the specific, but relevant to this question. You know what? I wish I was a good person. I wish I was pure in heart. Well, that's kind of religious speak. What do you mean pure in heart? Okay, well, what do you mean by heart? Well, heart are the things that I desire and that I want to do, and that's just what my real wants. Okay, I'll buy that. So what you're saying is you want things that are not good. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. I want things that are not good. Okay, well, you've wanted things in the past, and so that led you to have an impure heart in the past. Forget the past for a second, for the sake of argument. Now, draw a bright line at the present and talk about the present and the future. What's wrong with you now that you want to fix? Oh, well, okay, I still really, I know I should not like this stuff and not do this stuff, but I still kind of get into it and I still like it and do it. Okay, well, whose choice is it, whether at any point in the future, that you actually do that stuff? I'll use Kevin's, apparently, congratulations, Kevin, has recently lost 20 pounds on some sort of Atkins diet-y thing. I don't know if anybody's ever done an Atkins diet. Yeah, this is why he comes here, says that he wants to fight about it. I'm going to play dirty. So I don't know if you've ever tried the Atkins diet, but the first week or two of it, you just feel like someone has sapped all of your energy straight out, depending on how hardcore you get right into it, because all the carbs are gone and your energy level is just like on the bottom. And it's easy at that point to say, I no longer want this. I no longer want weight loss. I want energy. And so Twinkies, yes. Steak, no. Ultimately, what can happen is if you just persevere for like 2 weeks, your energy level miraculously comes back up somehow. I don't know how it works, but somehow it works. Okay.
Just get used to being a zombie.
Or you just get used to being a zombie, whatever it is. My point is this: does Kevin control what he wants? Now, that's an interesting question. He still wants Twinkies. I'm assuming he likes Twinkies. If you don't, what's wrong with you? He wants Twinkies, but he also wants to lose weight. Does he, and one may be stronger, like the pull of a Twinkie may be very, very strong. The pull of not wanting to lose weight may be like a distant, it's in the future kind of thing. Does he still have the power to choose at that point? He does. And he doesn't just choose whichever is the stronger desire. He actually chooses based on what he wants to, quote unquote, set his heart on. This is the miracle of choice, is that you can set your mind on what you want to think about. Set your mind on something just simply means this: choose what you're going to think about. Setting your heart on something simply means this: choose what you want. If you choose what you think about and you choose what you want, and you choose thinking about good, noble, true things, and you desire to want those things, yes, the first week will be hard. Yes, the second week will be a little bit easier. Yes, the third week gets even easier still. And in the miracle of what it is to be a human animal, habit takes over. In the same way that setting bad habits leads you into this spiral that's hard to escape from. I don't know if you believe this or not. I don't know if you know this to be true yet or not. Setting your heart and mind on good habits leads into this spiral that's hard to escape from. When you start doing the right things consistently, it's hard to stop doing that. It feels terrible when you don't do it. Your granularity on what's good and what's not becomes way more fine. It's an interesting thing. And I'm telling you, it works both directions equivalently.
So, I think though, one of the big questions, how do you know that you're in Olstein's church versus Piper's church, right? I think that's really what the question is, because I read an article recently about how Protestants have a hard time differentiating heresy, because if we have such a minimum standard, if you're going the wrong way, right?
Depends on which chat group you're in.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that as Protestants fragment, eventually some of them have to be off the reservation, right? And I think that's the question, and I think that's, as I pointed out, but I think we should talk about it in the next fall.
Yes, and which we will. And the Chicago, to Dennis's kind of point, or at least tangential to Dennis's point, the Chicago Statement of Faith is an example of, like, that was a lot of fragmentation. What's actually core for us? What can we agree on? What can we all go to and be like, yes, if you think that, then you're a Christian. And any of our arguments about the way guitars ought to be played and what songs should be sung and, hymnals versus iPhones and whatnot, we're saying literally that don't matter that much. It's helpful or not helpful. This is what matters. Okay. The other point that I'm bringing up is, this heart, my heart's impure. I'm telling you this. You can make your heart pure from now forward. That power actually resides in you. What you should choose, there are two ways to do it. There are three ways to do it. You can do it yourself and try to slog on, but it means you miss the point. You can do it yourself and realize, it would be really great to have God's help on this. And then doesn't it kind of make sense? I mean, the number of people who are like, I want to set my heart on being good. I genuinely want to do that, but I don't want God's help with it. I'm not going to ask. That actually doesn't make any sense. If what is good is defined by the nature of who God is, if what is in God's nature is what is good, then the no-brainer thing of I want to be good is equivalent to the question, I want to know God more. Think about that for a second before you say anything. Equivalent statements. I want to be good. That requires that you know what is good. God is what is good. That implies that the first step of I want to be good is I want to know God better. See how that puts you right on the same path, identical path? Then the second part, well, give me 1 second. The second part is, okay, I choose to instantiate that one. That power of choice exists with you. Now, the downside is you can't actually do anything to fix that. So imagine you were a murderer and a dirtbag and a Hell's Angel and whatever else, and then you decide on your own, you're like, I got to clean up. By the way, I know guys, non-Christians who have done this. Sergeant Major, Special Forces, it was like, woke up, had poured Jack Daniels in his cornflakes because he didn't have any milk, and he starts eating and he's like, man, this is good. And he said the next thought in his head was like, I have a problem. And he quit cold turkey. Like, he was falling down bender drunk all the time. He was like, I've got a problem, I'm going to fix this. And he did, without God's help, so to speak, and directly appealing to God for that kind of thing. The power of the will is strong. It's not nothing. You can do it. But you can't do anything about this. So if you're a murderer and a Hell's Angel or whatever else, and you decide, I'm getting rid of all that, I'm putting it behind me. It may still be the case that someone comes and knocks on the door is like, are you Scott? Yes. Okay, well, you're under arrest for 17 murders, that happened everywhere from last year to 10 years previously. That doesn't absolve you of that stuff. Yeah, hey, no, I got rid of all that. I'm a good dude now. They're like, it's great. Hop in the squad car.
State of Virginia's a little more hard-nosed.
Exactly, a little bit of, oh, brother, we're out there for you. God is the one who turns around, and when they drag you in front of the judge, is also the person who is wronged. So when someone says, well, that doesn't do it for the state of Georgia, God says, well, in the state of Georgia, I say it does it for me. And figure out the nuclear power plant stuff later if you want. My point is this, don't not diet because you think you can't do it. Don't not choose the good because you think it's outside your power. Who cares what the theology is? At the end of the day, if you choose to do good, either you'll be able to do it on your own or God will help you do it because he's promised to help you do it. One last comment, Dennis, and then we got to get to the other things too late again.
Are you saying that an atheist can't be good?
No, absolutely not.
You say you need God, you can't do it yourself.
I'm saying in order to know what is good, you have to know stuff that's about some of who God is. If an atheist, really interestingly, this is the point, if an atheist does that which is good, then it actually implies that he already knows something about God.
Not necessarily, just
Maybe sociologically.
Is it pure coincidence? If these two truths happen to be equivalent, and one of these truths is that this truth is that the truth that we're talking about here is what instantiates all of reality, then it's not a coincidence. It's actually a foundational, necessary conclusion from the fact that this truth proposition undergirds all the other truth propositions that are there. It's like that this first order logic is one of the basic laws of logic, and so none of the other of it works.
you're losing with that, what I call good nature.
Yeah, yeah.
An atheist can be a good person, can do the same amount of good as Kevin, who's a Christian.
Can he do the same amount of good? Let's pretend for a second, that one of the good things is if God gives you money, you give some of the money back. No atheist is going to do that because atheists don't tithe. Now they may turn around and give it to other people, in which case they'd be doing some of what's good. But if what God said is some of it goes back to me, some of it goes to your fellow man, some of it's for yourself. No atheist is going to give it to God because he doesn't believe God. It wouldn't make any sense to do that. Now that's a silly example but there are other truths like that. If part of what it is to be good means that you continue to seek that which is good and reject that which is bad.
So if I don't tithe to church, I'm automatically.
It's a bad example. I picked that one because it was funny. But at the end of the day, other things that you can't do is this. Be grateful to God. Right? So imagine for a second that you lived in a mansion, that your parents were the nicest people on the planet, and everything that you had was from them. Would it be wrong to not be grateful if they gave it to you sheerly out of love? And you're like, I didn't ask for this. I didn't even ask to be here. Screw you, old man. Is that good or bad? Seriously? You don't know whether that's good or bad? If your children acted like that?
They could have been assholes. They could have run me this stuff, and they could have been real jerks.
I'm saying if they were really, really good, if they were perfect people, just loving and good parents, and they were super nice to the kids, gave them everything they needed.
Okay, I'm grateful.
Okay. Ungrateful would be wrong. Atheist fails to be grateful. That's wrong.
Well, atheists could be grateful.
Well, he just needs to recognize the truth. In which case he would do that good. What I'm saying is he can't do the good of being grateful to God if he doesn't believe in God. It is the case that he could do it, but he has to believe in God in order to do so, in which case he's not an atheist anymore. All right. Yes, ma'am.
So that the theme that I keep hearing over and over again seems to come from Genesis 4:7, where God is talking to Cain,
Yes.
and he says, if you do well, will you not be accepted?
Yes.
Since sin is crouching at your door, it desires to have you. You must master it.
Yes.
It sounds very much like what we've been talking about.
Yeah, I think that we skip the first parts of Genesis way too quickly. This is some sort of proto stuff that just, who cares? Let's get to the important stuff. No, all the tee up that matters is in like Genesis first 5 chapters. Know that stuff cold because a lot of it, yes, absolutely. All right, time management, terrible, so bad. Just need to be fired. Somebody fire me. I need more time. I wish you had more time. I wish I could say that like Denzel Washington.
Should have more change.
We will talk about this.
More time doesn't help.
So we will do more of our stay of execution on the what do you need, let's live in community kind of stuff. Anybody who has significant needs right now, either put your stuff in the Bible shelf out there that I talked about. So if you have a need, you don't want to talk about it. Does anybody have a burning need that they need to share now with the group? I need your help with something. Going once? Going twice. All right. Continue to consider those needs as we leave in a more illuminated state than we left. That was the Spanish church pressing the other button on there, which is a subtle clue of like, you guys have gone past time again, Scott. Put the needs that you don't want to talk about in between the Bibles on that shelf. Justin is bringing either next time or the following time a suggestion box that'll actually be our need box. But remember, this is not just financial needs. Everybody always thinks that that's it. This is relational needs. This is help needs. This is, I need help in my relationship. I need help in my marriage. I need help with my father. I need help with my brother. I need help with you, Scott. That whatever it is, put it in there, and it's our job as a community of people who love each other to find out the needs of other people. The other thing I would tell you to do is this. This is a threat I'll levy. If you are not going to tell us what your needs are, I will send somebody after you to ask you what your needs are. And if you're the person who has no needs, you have to come tell me that because you're leading the class next time. So in this case, think about what your real needs are. What would it take? If somebody really loved you, what would they do for you? That's another way of asking that question. If somebody loved you, what would they do for you? You tell us that, and then we want to do that for you. And if that feels, and everybody in here is an introvert, or most people in here are introverts, I get it. We're going to love introverts the way introverts want to be loved. From a distance, impersonally. Okay, we'll do the best we can for you.
You said you're gonna have a box to put this,
Justin has one. He's going to bring it next time.
Sitting in my stuff, got it.
I'm going to be
Next week.
I'm going to be in Hotlanta next week. Peter's leading the group next time, and let the games begin. And then either partly during that time, but the following time we'll also talk more about what we're going to talk about over the course of the fall. Peter just had a great suggestion that I'm tempted to, what I'll say right now, we're going to do unless anybody doesn't like it. So that people can feel more comfortable in solid ground doing all the things they want to do. We're basically going to have tables that are split up by levels of responsibility you want to shoulder. The tables over here will be